Chernobyl was a disaster on an international scale. On the 26th of April 1986, a nuclear power station at Chernobyl in northwest Ukraine exploded, throwing millions of tons of poisonous radioactive dust into the air. While soldiers and firemen from Ukraine and the Soviet Union sacrificed their lives trying to contain the accident, winds blew the contamination around much of the world. It was even traced in America, over 4,000 miles away. But the heaviest levels of fallout landed in neighbouring Belarus, particularly in the Gomel region, just north of Chernobyl. Radioactive fallout is known to cause cancers and can contaminate an area for hundreds of years.
Quite soon after the accident, thyroid cancers began to appear. Initially people thought that would take many years, but within 2 or 3 years after the accident, children were developing thyroid cancer. And it grew from being a very rare disease to being quite prevalent. More than 100-fold increase in the Gomel region, in the most contaminated part of the country. Children have a lot of bone diseases, heart problems, kidney problems, all sorts of issues with their digestive system, a lot of children with diabetes, and children have been affected mentally as well. They say that radiation damages children's ability to concentrate.
The medical experts in Belarus recognised they had a major problem on their hands. Not only did they have extremely high numbers of people exhibiting conditions likely to be linked to the disaster, many of whom were children, but they were struggling with a lack of facilities, resources and knowledge on how to treat them. They needed help. And the help came. Chernobyl Children's Project UK was formed in 1995, originally to provide the children of Belarus with recuperative holidays in the UK. Giving these children some time in clean, uncontaminated air could make them more resilient to developing cancers and other radioactive related conditions.
In the first couple of years we just brought children from contaminated villages, children who didn't have major health problems at the time but could well develop them in the future. But after that we started to bring children with cancer as well, and particularly teenagers, because many of the other charities will only invite young children. The main reason for the holidays is to give the children 4 weeks of fresh air and clean food to get them away from a contaminated environment. But it's also a great psychological boost to the children.
These holidays have been a real benefit to many children from Belarus, but CCP quickly realised that holidays were simply not enough. In the years immediately after the disaster, Belarus was an extremely poor country and desperate for simple things such as nappies, clothes, blankets, medical supplies, medicines, furniture, toys and school books. So CCP sent its first humanitarian aid convoy in 1995. Since then, a large team of volunteers has delivered many hundreds of tons of much-needed aid to schools, children's homes, family associations and to social services centres, who then distribute the aid to poor families in the region. While humanitarian aid has helped, the authorities in Belarus needed more practical hands-on assistance. CCP found itself in the perfect position to offer this practical help.
After our first couple of years, we began to realise that children with disabilities were really having a very difficult time in Belarus. Most families at that stage were still encouraged to give up a very disabled baby. So a lot of them were living in institutions, and the families who did keep their children had a real struggle to look after them, and there was not a great deal of support from the state. So we started to work with Chernobyl, a big children's home deep in the countryside. When I first visited Chernobyl, it was very dark and dismal. The children had almost no toys, there were no wheelchairs, there was very little activity, and almost none of the children were getting any kind of education. So we started to take humanitarian aid there, and then 10 years ago we decided to organise holidays in the summer for the children. We take them to a holiday camp in a clean part of the country, and lots of volunteers from Britain go and make sure the kids have a great holiday. But what's really made the difference is that now many of the children at Chernobyl are getting an education. And I think that's partly because we have lobbied the Social Protection Department, the Education Department, and we've brought many people to Britain on educational visits, from teachers and directors of institutions to the heads of local government and even people from the ministries in Minsk. And that has helped, I think, to some extent to change the attitude.
For some of the younger children in Zorovici, it was clear that some would benefit from the chance to live in a family environment.
Rodnikut is a little house in Rogachov, which we bought because we had several children from Chernobyl who we felt would really develop if they lived in a family-type environment. And we found Papa Sergei, a lovely man, who agreed to be the legal guardian for the children, and some wonderful carers who really love the children and help them to develop. So Nazar, Stas, Anton and Anya have lived there now for 5 years and are very, very happy at Rodnikut.
While Rodnikut proved to be a huge success, limited funds meant that CCP couldn't repeat it. But the charity still wanted to make life better for the children in Zorovici. Hard work by the charity resulted in 6 children from Zorovici being moved to the more suitable Rachitsa boarding school. One of the 6, Ira, made such dramatic progress that she became the subject of a book, Living with Chernobyl. In 2008, at the age of 20, Ira was reunited with her parents, and she now lives with her family in a village near Rogachev. For some, though, their outlook is less fortunate. Some children are so ill they will not recover. CCP has made their final months more comfortable by helping to develop hospice care in Belarus.
In 2000, we set up the first children's hospice team outside the capital in Gomel, and they support around 20 families. And there are now many other small teams in other parts of the country. The Gomel hospice is entirely our responsibility. We set it up and we fund the doctor, the psychologist and the 2 nurses. And we bring some of them to Britain on educational visits. They come to visit hospices here, and then we have hospice specialists who go out to Belarus and offer training there.
There are some parents in Belarus who struggle to cope with the birth of a baby. So many of these babies find themselves living in Gomel's baby home.
There are, I think, 200 children living in this home. So over the years we've worked very closely with them, we've offered training, we've brought some of their staff to Britain, and that has helped to improve it greatly, to make it a much brighter, friendlier place. The children now, I think, are much more happy and outgoing than they used to be. But obviously it's still a big home with many, many children in it, and not at all an appropriate environment for babies and small children to be growing up in.
CCP has worked with the National Adoption Association in Belarus to provide training to potential foster parents for babies and very young children. In the future, the charity hopes that children who can't live with their own parents will be able to go to temporary foster families instead of into the baby home. The Mayflower Centre in Gomel is another project of CCP. Here a former kindergarten has been transformed into a place where severely disabled children can stay while their parents take a break from the pressures of looking after their disabled child.
Social services gave us a large part of a kindergarten. We transformed this into a very attractive, comfortable centre along the lines of respite centres in Britain. And the idea of the Mayflower is to give short breaks to children with severe disabilities, so that parents who've perhaps been struggling for many years without any break at all can have a fairly regular break of a few days or a week, knowing that their children are happy and well cared for. Social services in Gomel are now funding much of the staff and the care for the children there. So that's been a really positive step, that we set up the centre and they've realised it's something they really need, and they've taken on much of the cost for that.
Vikov is an institution where the charity works with young adults with learning and physical disabilities.
Vikov is a home for adults with mental disabilities or mental illness. and we provide 2 teachers to work with some of the young people there. These are young people who've grown up with no education at all, so they had learning difficulties and physical disabilities, and some of them had absolutely no input at all in the past really, so they've grown up very much living in their own world. So teachers are trying to work with these young people and give them a little bit of development and love and care and attention.
Since 1995, Chernobyl Children's Project UK has touched the lives of many in Belarus, but there's still much work to be done.
For the future, we need to make sure that we have a great future for our children at Rodney Cut. At the end of 2008, we started to build an extension. As the children are becoming teenagers, they needed more space. We hope to continue working very closely with the education and social protection departments to provide training to get more children out of orphanages and into loving families.
The work of Chernobyl Children's Project UK is made possible by a dedicated team who work for the charity in Belarus, and in Britain by the hundreds of people who host children, deliver aid, volunteer at the holiday camps and raise funds.
The thing about the Chernobyl disaster that is different from so many others is that as the years go by, people are not able to just pick up the pieces and rebuild their lives and start again. It seems that as the years go by, many of the problems are getting worse. It's the later generations who are going to be more deeply affected by the accident.
Belarus will remain contaminated for hundreds of years. There will still be children born with deformities, learning disabilities, cancers and tumours. There will still be institutions like Zuravici. There is still much work to be done.